Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Beyond Time and Task, Whole System Personalisation. Today, the webinar is going to be given by Chris Tanner, who's our Client Director in UK and Ireland. So thanks to so many for joining, and I'll hand you over to Chris.
Thanks, Yvonne. That's great. So, morning, everyone. Nice to see so many of you here. It puts the pressure on a little bit. So today we're going to be looking at Beyond Time and Task. This is the first in a series of 4 webinars we're going to be doing through the autumn, just looking at outcomes in social care, just focusing on that sort of on the ideas behind it. So just before we get going, hopefully you can all hear me, hopefully you can all see the screen. So just to introduce myself, I am the Client Director for Aspirico in the UK and Ireland. My own background was actually in social care, as opposed to, I'm not from a technological background. Within Aspirico, we tend, or all of our client management sort of teams are from a social care background, and we see ourselves very much as a social care organisation rather than just a software supplier. So, I'm just going to brief introduction into what we're going to be looking at. So, as I said, this is the first in a series of 4 webinars looking on outcomes and their impact on personalisation. We're looking at these themes on a system level and also on a provider level, highlighting the role that technology plays. And I think that's something that's become very apparent over the last year with everything that's been going on. Well, nearly 2 years now. And then we'll be looking at iPlanet, Aspirico's client management support management system. And then we'll be looking at how that might impact the future of the social care sector. But today we're just looking at sector-wide personalisation, how technology fits into that, and particularly how iPlanet fits into that. So when we're talking about the social care system as such, I've got a fairly rudimentary breakdown. Is, you have 2 ends of the spectrum. People who are living fully independently, whether they're looking after themselves, using strength-based approaches, and using services for signposting and advice. And at the other end, you've got permanent support, where the least independent sort of services that someone will receive is if they're receiving dom care, residential care, or palliative care. Now, beyond that, we also have, so on the more independent side, we have independence with informal support. So that's people when they're supported by family members, accessing the community and some of the third sector services that are available. And then we've got crisis support at the other end of the sort of least independent areas. And then we've got independence with formal support, so things like extra care housing, supported living services, particularly in LD and mental health, and telecare. And more recently, over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen intermediate care services, filling in the gaps to try and keep people as independent as possible, such as reablement, step down, step up beds, rapid responses, short breaks. And the general idea is to try and keep people as far to the green and the most independent end as possible. So these services at the moment tend to be fairly siloed off, fairly independent of each other, although we are sort of looking in the UK certainly at more sort of integration between these services. But it's likely someone moving between these services at each stage is going through a process of care planning again. And we're just going to have a look at, how do we personalise that process? So the sector has been moving away from time and task. So what do I mean by that? Unfortunately, it's still quite prevalent in older people services, but I think in the learning disability mental health services, we're moving much more to an outcome focused service. But even within those subsectors, we're still looking at sort of input focused services. So when I'm talking about that, that means that support planning and care planning is measured and delivered as just a series of ticking some lists of what you've been doing, and you do that every day of the week. So how I sort of so this approach can create dependency. You're doing things for people, but not doing things with people. And it's not particularly, and the lack of personalisation. What this is basically a menu of services that someone gets to choose from, rather than designing that service around the person. An analogy I've used in my previous career and things, when you're trying to move away from that time and task basis, is if you're going to a dinner party or you're catching up with your friends at the weekend, do you talk about, oh yeah, I got up and had a shower and then I made breakfast and then I brushed my teeth and brushed my hair? That's not what we talk about. It's not. These are the things that we have to do before life starts. What we talk about are new jobs, going on holidays, going on trips. We talk about books we've read, moving house, cooking dinners, going on holiday, getting back to good health, going to the football, going for dinner, going to school, learning new skills. If you're anything like me, then you talk about your pet dog quite a lot, losing weight, going to parties, this sort of thing. So these are the activities that make up. Like, this is what people want to do. These, that time and task based approach is really looking at things that we have to do. And yet within the sector, still these seem to have such sort of disproportionate prominence. It comes from a commissioner level at some stages, particularly in older people's care. You're measuring, and your services are commissioned based on what you're going to be doing, not on the impact that it has. But what we're talking about here, the things that people want to do in the context of the social care sector, is that we're talking about outcomes. So outcomes describe what a person wants to achieve. So there are several types of outcome, but in the main you have an achievement and goals outcome. So it's something specific that a person supported wants to achieve, wants to do. You also have prevention outcomes. So this is something that someone wants support not to have to do again. So it may be, not wanting to go back into hospital again after several falls, or they're sort of maintenance outcomes, which is just for someone to maintain a level of independence, and not and not slip down into more, needing more dependent services. So when we're looking at outcomes, what should they be? And I've various projects I've worked on over the years and various services I've managed and overseen, there are different types, but really they should be driven by the person's aspirations. So if we want to personalise the system, we want to make sure, and personalise our services, we need to make sure that we're looking at what the person wants, not what we can offer them from that sort of menu based, not what we're going to do. What is the outcome? What do we want this support service to help the person achieve? And to be able to do that, they do need to be realistic. They do need to be achievable, and they do need to be meaningful. And in my experience, I've seen plans where outcomes have just been listed and they're quite basic, and they're easily achievable. And again, they're designed more for the provider than the person being supported. And they will always evolve and they will always change. People change their minds about what they want to do and what they want to achieve. Myself included, 2 years ago when I was working on some social care innovation projects, I never thought I'd be here at Espirico, but here we are. So people's aspirations change, and we need to make sure that our services reflect that. And it's very easy to get dragged into what aren't outcomes as well. I've seen this a number of times. Things like, I want to go to a day centre. That's not an outcome. That's just that's part of support planning. I want an accessible shower fitted. That's just a service. I would like more care and support. That's a request. That's not an outcome. So it's important to bear in mind when we're looking at outcomes, to base them around what the person wants to achieve, what they aspire to. So this is for those various types of service that we looked at. As I said, at the moment, people tend to move between those services, and at each stage, they may have different sort of support plans for that particular service. But what should be consistent throughout those, whichever services you're accessing, whether it's one at a time or at the same time, are that people's outcomes are consistent and that everybody's working to towards the same sort of goals, the same achievements that they want to make. And that's where technology has a real part to play. So obviously technology improves communication between services, so you can wrap those services around the person supported, and it makes those messages, particularly the outcomes and specific needs that people have to be aware of, it makes them portable. They can take that information with them. But that may require some level of integration, but technology can also support the integration of services as well. If we're looking at common data sets, or we're looking at sort of standard data sets that can be transferred between services, it can improve that. Or even something as simple as exporting someone's support plan from one system ahead of a spell in hospital or going into a respite service. And that helps to improve the consistency of the message, the consistency of support someone's receiving, regardless of which service they're using. And of course, iPlanet, as with a number of other different systems, will be cloud-based. So you're looking at real-time data. So your support plan is always up to date. The outcomes that you want to achieve are always accurate and up to date. And as they change, as we said before, these things, the outcomes evolve. So if someone's going to a respite service they used 6 months ago, they may have completely different achievements. So by having that data, that information in real time, it allows that consistency of support to be delivered. And also for the provider side, that real-time monitoring really improves quality and safety for the people supported, but also for the provider to evidence the good work that they're doing. So technology can really support this person-centered approach. If we're going to personalize the system, we need to personalize on a local level and on a service-by-service level. And when we designed iPlanet, this is what we had in mind. So, we're looking at our CEO founded Aspirico on the basis of some personal experience of accessing various types of support service. And what he found was that a lot of legacy systems, whether digital or paper-based, or those processes, were designed for the provider, and that the person supported was being shoehorned into it. But over the last sort of 10 years, we've been moving much more to a person-centered approach. So the difference being the traditional approach, you're looking at generic services. So as I said at the beginning, you're looking at a menu of services that you choose from, whereas a person-centered, personalised approach, people have much more choice and control over their care planning. The traditional approach is far more institutional. So again, it's that sort of menu analogy. Again, you've got this is what we can offer. So take what you like, as opposed to a person-centered approach being far more independence orientated. We're looking much more at supporting people to maintain their daily activities, connect with people, and based much more around that person. Traditionally, I know certainly when I started in the social care sector, it was a very deficit-based approach. So we're focusing on what a person cannot do. So we'll be looking at a particular service user. It will be, these are the things that Mrs. Jones is unable to do for herself. This is what we're going to do for her. Whereas a person-centered approach, we focus much more on the strengths. What's someone really good at? Just because Mrs. Jones has trouble getting up and down the stairs, that's not really, addressing that with a support service isn't going to make much difference to her life. But if you look at the strength base, you say Mrs. Jones actually was a fantastic piano player. Then you've got something to build on, and you can say, okay, let's get back into some piano lessons. Let's see if we can see if Mr. Jones can teach piano to some youngsters locally. Things like, so it's far more fulfilling, far more meaningful when you're building that plan. And the traditional approach, as we started right at the beginning with, is much more input focused. Working in domiciliary care earlier in my career, for example, it was, support plans were basically a list of things we were going to do and how long it took to do them, as opposed to a far more outcome focused approach, which is underlying principle of person-centered approaches is looking at what the person wants to achieve. What impact is your service having? Not what you put in, but what is the person getting out? And the traditional approach, again, sort of under that same sort of idea of looking at deficits, it actually made services quite risk averse. And I certainly remember, again, from see reams and reams of risk assessments telling people what they can't do or what they shouldn't be doing because of the risk. A more person-centered approach is we're much more risk aware, so we're willing to prepare for potential risks. If we focus on someone's strengths, we look at the outcomes they want to achieve, and then we mitigate those risks rather than just say, no, we can't do that because it's too risky. And these are the principles that we took many, many years ago when we first built iPlanet. And we've been building and we've developed the system since then in conjunction with providers in the sector, with our customers.